Hello, and welcome to Aileen's Arcane Archive. I'm your pajamaed archivist, Louise, one half of the Ailene Lynn Ray writing team. And I'm really excited today because I want to introduce you to one of my favorite independent fantasy authors, and that is Rachel Rener. But before I get into her books, a little note about my PJs here. So I have this adorable, slightly unhinged, but absolutely lovely friend who, when she found out that I was going to be doing these episodes of the Arcane Archive and how much I loved otters, she decided that she was going to give me a stack of PJs and PJ adjacent attire all in otters. And why am I telling you this now? Well, because Rachel Rener has a group on Facebook called Rachel's Renegades. And if any renegade out there knows, most of you absolutely adore otters, just as I do. And so I am wearing this in honor of all of my fellow renegades out there. So back to Rachel, though. Rachel is a fantasy author, and she has done a couple of different types of works. She's very prolific, and one of her most popular series is the Inked series. I mean, look at this cover. It's absolutely beautiful. The Inked series. Now, I have this entire set. Look at these covers. Beautiful. The second one. All in these beautiful colors. But she also has a pink, hot pink, bright pink, leather-bound omnibus of this entire series, if you're looking for all of it, as well as, you know, excellent additional pictures like this on the inside. And one of these days I will get one of those big pink books, so it will shine like a giant beacon on my shelves back here in the archive. But in the meantime, these are beautiful and absolutely worth it. So I really struggled trying to figure out what book to introduce you to out of her books that she has. But I have to say that one of my favorites is the Bone Whisperer Chronicles. Now, this is a duology, two separate books that are in here. It is a young adult coming of age fantasy. And I got the hardback with the sprayed edges, and it's just gorgeous. But not only is it gorgeous, it's an amazing story. So let me tell you about this, and you can decide if you want to go off and learn more about Rachel Rener. So time waits for no one except Lila Quinn. Willow, a young and reluctant new mother, is terrified of her infant, Lila, namely, her peculiar form of epilepsy. Every time Lila's eyes glaze over, terrible things happen. Flowers shrivel, food goes to rot, and even Willow's long auburn hair turns stark white. Soon, it all becomes too much to bear. In the middle of the night, Willow and her mother dump the baby at the fire station 2 towns over and are never heard from again. The next morning, Chief Stanley Quinn takes Lila home and cares for the toddler as best as he can. With medication, her epilepsy remains under control for the most part. But as a teenager, Lila isn't always keen on taking her pills. When she sneaks away to a rock concert with the cutest boy in school, a breakthrough seizure triggers an accident, landing both of them in the hospital. After Stanley breaks down and confesses everything to his adopted daughter, she decides to track down the young girl who gave her up 16 years ago. The young girl who is now presumed to be dead. As Lila's commitment to finding her birth mother becomes a quest to solve a long-forgotten cold case, she must learn how to control her peculiar gift before she kills someone again. So, I have my otter PJs. My comfortable fuzzy blanket, my cup of tea, which I'm going to take a drink from so I can read clearly. So, sit back and find your comfy place, and let me tell you a story. The Girl Who Talks to Ashes. Prologue. Rotten Apples. 15-year-old Willow was terrified of her newborn Lila from the very beginning. It wasn't just the recurrent seizures that would grip her baby's tiny little body and contort her wrinkled face, still pale and peeling from the womb. It was the strange things that would happen around those seizures, the strange things that would happen to anything or anyone unfortunate enough to be nearby. She first noticed this peculiarity when Lila was a few weeks old and her eyes began to glaze over. Bone-tired and delirious after yet another sleepless night, Willow stifled a sob, bracing herself for what she knew would happen to Lila next. A disconcerting tick of her right eye, a sudden stiffening of her arms and legs, and a series of spasms that would ripple across her diminutive limbs like shock waves. All of these things occurred just as the last 13 episodes Willow had suffered through since Lila had been brought into the world, delivered in a plastic waiting pool on her grandmother's kitchen floor. What Willow wasn't expecting at that moment was for the half-eaten apple resting on her nightstand to crumble apart without provocation or cause, shriveling into a moldy, stinking pile of decay. As Lila convulsed on her lap, staring straight ahead with wide, dilated pupils that seemed to focus on nothing at all, Willow stared at the maggots wriggling atop the putrid slop in horror, scrubbing the sleep from her eyes as she choked on a cry that had lodged itself against her windpipe. By the time Willow had found her voice, shrill and etched with panic, and her mother, clad in curlers and hastily cinched robe, had come barreling down the stairs, the mound of rotting pulp had once more returned to a plump, shining apple. While Celeste gripped the banister and tried to catch her breath, her daughter's blood-curdling screams had woken her from a deep and pleasant sleep. Willow was blustering something about worms and Lila having yet another fit, but there the child was, resting peacefully in Willow's arms. With an indignant huff, Celeste snatched the infant from her hysterical daughter, instructing her to drink a mug of lime flower tea and get some sleep at once. Though Willow prayed, fervent, desperate pleas that she whispered to the ceiling while her daughter slept in the handmade cradle beside her bed, the child's peculiarities didn't stop there. With every subsequent seizure that week, steaming concoctions of herbs would evaporate, hot poria and wild yam soup would turn sour and black, and fresh bouquets of lavender would shrivel to dust. Though everything returned to its natural state the moment the baby stilled, each episode brought untold terror to Lila's young mother, who would cry out for help, only to find that help always arrived a moment too late. Having never witnessed Willow's unsettling claims firsthand, Celeste could only balk at the teenager's tears. She had no sympathy for the girl, who had brought the situation upon herself by being rash and foolish. Furthermore, she was certain that the hallucinations stemmed from a tainted spirit and Willow's own negative energy. She would simply have to try harder to overcome these things. And so, despite the fact that Lila's seizures continued and Willow's hysteria worsened by the day, hospitalization for either of them was simply out of the question. No doctor or pharmaceutical drug could cure such ailments better than herbal and spiritual remedies. Willow's mother continued to insist, each day more emphatically than the last. Late one night, after changing the baby's diaper on the bathroom floor, Willow stood and regarded her tired reflection in the medicine cabinet. Once pretty and full of smiles, she now grimaced at the stranger staring back at her, the stranger with limp, oily hair and purple circles beneath her sunken eyes, the stranger who had left her friends and her former life behind her when she fled to another state to raise a baby that she never wanted in the first place. As she gazed at herself, narrow shoulders slumped beneath the heavy weight of self-pity, she failed to notice the baby beginning to seize on the pink bathroom rug. Therefore, it caught Willow by surprise when the taut, smooth skin of her cheeks abruptly shriveled, clinging to her skull as faint brown spots appeared across the loose, crepe-like skin on her neck. As her long auburn ponytail blanched to a shock white and her hair began to fall out in snowy clumps, Willow cried out hoarsely, nearly stumbling over Lila, whose round hazel eyes were glazed and far away, as she threw herself away from the splintering mirror. By the time Celeste burst through the bathroom door, Willow was sobbing on the cold, moldy tile, clutching her youthful cheeks and babbling some nonsense about being an old hag, while her poor baby cried in the bathroom sink. Celeste snatched her wailing granddaughter from the basin, feeling her hot temper flaring in her cheeks. "What is the matter with you?" she hissed, straining to keep her voice low. They'd barely lived in that house for a month, and already Willow's unmistakable wailing had thrice attracted the attention of neighbors, much to Celeste's shame and chagrin. To think she had worried it would be the baby's wails that would tip them off to Lila's existence. Every time they came over unannounced, it posed yet another risk of them discovering her daughter's bastard child. her lips pursed with contempt as she regarded the hysterical teenager still curled up on the bathroom floor whimpering. Why do you continue to carry on like this? We've burnt white sage, rosemary, lavender. I even brought in Shaman Mike to chant for your healing, which you know was no small feat, given his book tour schedule. I've given you every sacred herb imaginable, from dandelion root to Japanese kelp. Ow, Lila, don't grab Grammy's hair, she scolded, setting the infant back in the sink. Do you know how much that tiny jar of kelp cost? How many hours I had to work at the factory to make up for it? Mom, Willow started, pointing at Lila, who had once again gone rigid. Don't interrupt me, Willow. Frankly, I'm starting to think your constant need for attention. Ah! Willow's bloodshot eyes widened in horror as her mother's harangue abruptly turned to shrill screams. Celeste had just noticed her right hand, the one that had been slapping the countertop for emphasis, had become withered and gray, its paper-thin flesh rotting away at the knuckles to expose a glimpse of the bones beneath. She screamed, and Willow screamed, and the baby screamed, all together combining into a piercing cacophony of terror and confusion. It woke the neighbors' 3 miniature pinchers, who howled alongside them from the next house over, mistaking their panicked wails for a friendly hello. It didn't matter that the skin on Celeste's hands returned to its plump, creamy complexion moments later. After that night, she swore she would never touch that baby again, and she never did. The next morning, baby Lila, swathed in garlands of sage, oregano, and dill, was left in her cradle along with a bowl of Indian turmeric and pasteurized goat's milk, while her frantic grandmother scoured piles of sacred texts and cookbooks for answers. She directed her findings several at a time to a rather flustered Willow, who was running around the little house attempting to implement the various sacraments just so. Along with white sage, lemon blueberry-scented candles burned on the coffee table beside a store-bought Ouija board and the pink iridescent quartz crystal that Shaman Mike had left to assist with negative chi. As Celeste shifted her attention from her mystical herb pamphlets to the yellow pages, where she was attempting to locate a nearby shaman in Mike's absence, Willow's childhood tabby cat sauntered in through the open window, attracted by the bowl of warmed goat's milk resting a few inches away from the baby. Mangy, nearly blind, and missing an ear from its numerous neighborhood fights, the old cat jumped into Lila's cradle, lapping at the orange-tinted concoction with an entitled air. Unfortunately, it was at that exact moment that Lila's happy gurgles broke off, disrupted by her first seizure of the day. Before Willow could cry scat, the poor cat was dead. A fetid, decomposing pile of bones and fur resting on the crumpled remnants of a time-worn fleece blanket. Willow clamped her hands over her open mouth to stifle a scream, her eyes bulging. The gruesome scene lay just inches from the baby, but she didn't dare go near the child, not while her round eyes stared at nothing and her body was rigid. Celeste stared wordlessly from the kitchen table, letting the phone book drop from her fingers to the linoleum floor. After a long moment, the baby's fit passed, and both the cat and the blanket returned to their previous intact condition. But the animal didn't move. Moments became minutes, and minutes eventually became hours. By late afternoon, Willow had to accept that poor Pebbles was gone, his early morning yowls never to be heard again. Tears burning her eyes, she carefully laid his blanket-wrapped body in an old Sears shoebox and left it under the back porch with a little prayer, as well as several handfuls of his favorite brand of tuna-flavored cat food beside the box, just in case. That night, well after the last bedroom light in the neighborhood had been flicked off and the moon had once more sunk below the horizon, Willow and her mother wrapped Lila in the warmest blankets they could find, pinned a note beneath her chin, and left her on the doorstep of the fire station, 2 towns over. Their van was found on the side of the freeway the next morning, the key in the ignition and the engine still running. Willow and Celeste never made it back home that night. Rumors and wild conjectures churned through their small town, but no one was able to provide the chief of police any leads. As for the baby, only the traveling shaman knew of her existence, for Celeste had delivered her granddaughter herself in the hopes of hiding her young daughter's shameful deeds. And so, with no clues to link to their disappearance and no record of Lila ever having existed, no one ever found out what had happened to the 3 of them. After a few years, their names were forgotten altogether. Time has a way of doing that. That's Chapter 1 of The Girl Who Talks to Ashes by Rachel Rener, part of the Bone Whisperer Chronicles duology. If you liked what you heard, we will have links provided where you could find this book for yourself and read more about Lila. Thank you for joining me today. I really enjoyed having you here, and I want you to remember that your life is a story, so go out and live it.